Stint 2, year 3 in the Sean Miller era, again at Xavier. And man, this roster is absolutely loaded. I think Sean did a fantastic job last year with, back against the wall with Fremantle and Hunter, out of the mix before the season started. But man, I got a lot to talk about this roster because I think it's absolutely loaded. Christian and Nick here with Paul Fritschner. He's the guy with Xavier, Sean Miller pod and everything. You guys see him on Twitter. So Paul, tell us, what are the expectations this season? Because I'm very high on this team. And am I wrong to think that there's too many good players on this team? And how is it all going to play out?
Well, first of all, Nick, Christian, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. I do think that there's always a difference when you talk about depth and quality of depth. And that's something that we talked about. Adam Baum, my co-host of the show, and Rick Broering on the Musketeer Report podcast. We did a joint podcast the other day kind of breaking down the team. And one of the things that we talked about was the difference between depth and quality of depth. And you looked at last year and you said to yourself, okay, there's a lot of guys on this team, some international players, transfers, fresh faces, but a lot of players that hadn't played college basketball, and you didn't really know what they were going to bring to the table. So you had a lot of guys, but it wasn't really quality depth, if you follow what I mean. This year, you have so many players that have played college basketball. You have a lot of guys that have won at a really high level. And I think there are going to be maybe one or two guys that we're sitting here on September 18th saying, man, that guy could be a starter, or that guy could be a potential 6th or 7th man. And by February or March, he's not getting a lot of minutes just because of the way that this roster is shaking out. Sean went from having the maybe most inexperienced high major roster last year at the Division I level to now having one of the most experienced rosters at the Division I level. Granted, they haven't all played at high majors. Ryan Conwell coming over from Indiana State, Marcus Foster from Furman, Dante Maddox from Toledo. I could go all the way down the list. But you look at a guy like Marcus Foster and you say to yourself, oh, he's transferring into Xavier from Furman. Well, 2 years ago, he was on the Furman team that beat Virginia in the NCAA tournament. He's won a conference championship. Ryan Conwell was about 6 inches short on a heave at the buzzer from winning an NIT title last year with Indiana State. Dante Maddox Jr. played for a very good Todd Kowalczyk coached Toledo team for the last, you're talking about guys that have won. And now, to your point, Christian, a lot of good players and high quality depth, not to mention the bigs and everything else that I didn't even mention there.
Yeah, I agree. Like, the backcourt is great, and there's no question marks around them. I guess, the question mark for me would be Jerome Hunter and Fremantle's health, and also kind of what can we expect from Hughley coming in.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing in the front court, the front court without a doubt is the biggest question mark for the team, because you're not really sure, like you said, what you're going to get. Zach Fremantle is fully healthy. He's been cleared. He's been practicing. He's been back at full speed for months. Jerome Hunter is right on the edge of getting cleared. They're hoping to have him, as they say, fully back next week, September 24th. That's the first day of official practice. They're hoping that Jerome will be fully cleared and be able to come back as if he's going to play, whatever they need him to do. He should be cleared next week. Hopefully that all happens, but that's the goal. Then you have John Hughley, who transfers in from Oklahoma, and his goal was to lose weight. I mean, you're talking about a guy that was over 300 pounds. He's down, dozens and dozens of pounds now at this point. And can he keep that weight off? And can he really sustain that into playing shape? Because it's one thing to lose the weight. It's another thing to actually play at a pace and a conditioning level where that is kind of conducive to being, successful over the course of a season. But the name that I haven't even mentioned yet in the first 4.5 minutes of this show is Lassina Traore. So he goes by Bazile, if I call him that here on the show, but on the roster it'd be Lassina Traore. Lassina transfers in from Long Beach State, another team that won their conference tournament last year. He played in the NCAA tournament. Now they got bounced big time in the first round by Arizona, but yet again, a player that has won and has played in the NCAA tournament. And so I think when you look at the front court, there are definitely questions like, can Zach and Jerome play at a high level for the entire course of the season because they're coming off of injuries? We have to see. I'm more optimistic about Zach's ability right now to stay on the court than Jerome's. Not to say that Jerome is being held back in the sense of like, oh, he's going to get hurt again or something like that. It's just Jerome has had a long history of injury issues over the course of his career, even dating back to his time at Indiana. Zach coming back now from another foot surgery, you'd like to think that he's going to be, okay over the course of the season. But both guys, I mean, this is Zach's sixth year around Xavier. Sixth year around Xavier. He's never played a full season. I mean, his first season was cut short because of COVID. And the next year was, the COVID season where you're missing out on games. Then he's been hurt at the end of years. I mean, he hasn't played a full season yet. So Zach is in a better place than Jerome right now as far as, conditioning and actually being at a full pace back and forth with the team. But the idea would be that, Jerome gets out there on the 24th and kind of hopefully would pick right up where he left off. But he had, suffered a cardiac incident. Then he comes back and tears his Achilles. That's really hard to come back from. I'd expect that they kind of maybe ease him back into it. But, as it goes on, I think the next month and a half is going to tell us a lot about that before opening night.
At first, when I said, like, are there too many guys? I feel like that was kind of simple-minded of me because at the end of the day, like, Fremantle and Hunter, it's a great luxury to have that you don't have to throw those guys into high-level roles, right? Like, as you said, Traore is a 3-year player who's averaged, 11, close to a double-double, right?
Yeah, no, he averaged double-double last year, yeah.
12 and 10. I was looking at defensive rebounds. But, and then Hugo's the guy was averaging 15 and 8 as a sophomore for a really bad Pitt team. This is when I was at Wake, and like he was maybe the best post scorer in the ACC. Like he is a super talented offensive player, and there's weird stuff that happened. I don't know exactly what happened that second year at Pitt, and then like last year was a little up and down. And I understand all the weight, the weight stuff and everything with him, but he's a guy that I think could really thrive, under the right in the right situation. And the way Xavier, and another thing with Sean Miller is like he will adapt his play style to the personnel. Like, it's going to be a good offensive team. Like last year was super guard heavy and all about pace. And then like in the past, it's been like all these quick post ups, which I love. And like Hugo's a guy that I think could be really effective in the right situation. And then Traore, you'd like to see a little bit more rim protection for a guy of his size, but hasn't averaged over, half a block per game. So that's something. And usually with a Xavier team like this, we know offense is going to be there. Defense is the question. But all that to say, you've got 4 very capable guys in the front court, and we'll see how it plays out with health and everything. But it's a great situation. It's a better thing to have too many guys than not enough. So I think he'll figure out the minutes and everything there, right?
Yeah, no doubt. Especially, like you said, especially with Hughley, if he can be at playing shape the whole season, I mean, that just completely changes the dynamic of the team.
And then we look at the wings in the backcourt, like McKnight is the the piece of continuity, and he was great last year as a playmaker and attacking the basket and shot the ball well too. Trey Green and Dalen Swain, I was really excited for their sophomore leaps. I still am. I think Swain could be drafted this year, I think. And also I read something about him kind of being slid more to a 3 than a 4, just because clearly front court was where he was needed most last year. Those guys are super enticing me. But then, the guys you talked about, Maddox, Foster Conwell, we even mentioned Cam Fletcher. I'm not sure what his health situation is, but do you think Green and Swain are going to be able to really ascend this year? Or do you think they're on kind of a slower, is their track slowed down a bit because of all these guys, or are they guys that really could go to the moon? Because I love what Green can do off the bounce, and Swain is a athletic freak who's very skilled too.
No, I think you're spot on, especially with Dalen Swain, just because his versatility is going to bring a lot to the table with this team. You'd like to see him shoot the ball a little better, maybe scoring improve in that area. But he's such an elite defender, and this team is going to need that. You look at Jerome Hunter, you look at Dalen Swain. This team is going to need somebody to get in there and get a stop, be able to wall up defensively, maybe down low. And I do think you're going to see Dalen, in that 3 spot a little bit too, just as the rosters kind of shake themselves out here, because you do have a lot of options in the backcourt. Trey Green, That dude can shoot the ball like maybe nobody I've ever seen. I mean, it is truly incredible how well he can shoot the basketball. The question mark has always been his size. It's always been, can he stay on the court? Can you keep him on the court defensively? But offensively, as a spark, as somebody that can run the offense, as somebody that's been here a year and knows exactly what Sean Miller wants. I mean, Davion McKnight is such a huge piece to this team, maybe the most important returning piece in the sense of, like you said, continuity and just getting up and down the court, going 94 feet in a blink of an eye, being able to get the ball out in transition. But Trey Green can do all of that as well. He's just an underclassman that needs a little bit more experience. I think this team as a whole will help Trey recover defensively better than last year's team did. I think this year's team can cover up Trey's defensive weaknesses better than what happened last year, which would be a little, I would say better for Trey to be able to keep him on the court for longer stretches.
So I brought this up with Chris like a week ago when we were talking to Xavier, and I kind of compared him to last year's TCU team, just from the standpoint of like it's a ton of good players, like 1 through 10, but TCU, in my opinion, has lacked like a proven leader and someone down the stretch who can just go get you that winning bucket and make a final play. So who is the leader? Who is that guy down the stretch that Xavier is going to depend on this season?
I think the leadership part is probably hard for me to say here in mid-September because I think that'll emerge as, guys make plays and things like that and the season goes on. But if you're looking for a playmaker, if you're looking for somebody to go get a bucket, I think Ryan Conwell has a chance to be the best player on this team at the end of the season. I really do. I think we could be sitting here, in the second week of March, getting ready for Selection Sunday, and we're saying to ourselves, Ryan Conwell was the best overall player on this team. And I think his ability to shoot the ball, to score, to see the floor, and have the game come to him for as fast as Sean wants to play, it doesn't feel like Ryan plays sped up. It feels like he's able to see the floor, he's able to be patient, and he's able to really make a play. And that's so important for a team that last year at some points just had to rely too much on Quincy Oliveri to make a three when they needed it. And the problem was the other team knew that was coming too. And yeah, Dalen Swain had a game-winning dunk against Georgetown. You could go down the line there. Desmond Claude had a great game on the road at Georgetown. But for the most part, if you needed a shot, it was probably coming from Quincy Oliveri. Desmond Claude came up a little short at Villanova a couple other times just down the stretch of a game where you were begging for somebody to step up and hit that big shot. I think Ryan Conwell is capable of that. I think Dante Maddox is an absolutely elite shooter that if you want to look at like a small ball lineup of Davion McKnight, Ryan Conwell, Dante Maddox, maybe like Marcus Foster and a Zach Fremantle, that lineup can go out there and score at will in the last 30 seconds of a game. And I think that's what's really exciting for me anticipating this season and what we're going to see, just because I think a guy like Conwell could lead the ship there.
It's really unbelievable how stacked the top of this Big East is with Xavier, Creighton, Marquette, UConn. I think Xavier has as good a chance as anyone to knock UConn off the top of the Big East ladder. It's just crazy to, like, when you just talked about that lineup, that sounded great to me, and you didn't even say so many good players on this team. Like it's really like I don't think there's a team in the country that 1 to 10 is as strong. And I like is two other like is Cam Fletcher going to be involved here at all? And
I haven't mentioned
red shirt.
Who'd you say?
Roddy Anderson.
So Roddy Anderson is redshirting. We won't see him at all this year. And I will say I love what Roddy like. I sometimes will talk to people about Roddy and be kind of over the moon about what he could bring next year, and then I have to pull back and say, okay, wait, hold on, before I get overly anxious about Roddy. He's not going to play this year. He is redshirting, which I think is very valuable. Obviously, learning the system and everything else, being around these guys. Cam Fletcher, I don't anticipate him making any kind of an impact on this team this year. I if he plays at all, I would be kind of surprised. Just because he's coming off that injury. Sean has made it very clear on our podcast about how they want to make sure he eases back into everything because he's been hurt so much. I mean, he's been around college basketball for years, and I think he still has 3 years of eligibility left. I mean, he's just been plagued with injuries. So they are being extremely patient with Cam. I would be shocked. They haven't officially declared that he's redshirting yet. Roddy is. But with Cam, I would be shocked if he plays much, if at all, this year. But, you know, if there's an injury and they need him and he's healthy, you know, in late January, early February, I'm not going to sit here and say he won't play. But, yeah, the top of the Big East with UConn, with Creighton, like we talked about the other day on our podcast that we did on Saturday, Creighton, I think, is pretty top heavy. And the one team that you mentioned there, Marquette, I'm very interested to see what's going to happen with Marquette, because I think there's a chance that they're very good and there is a chance that they take a significant step back. And I don't really know what to expect, because there are going to be a lot of teams, a lot of coaches, and a lot of donors around the country that are going to keep a very close eye on what happens to Marquette this year. Because Shaka Smart said, we're not using the portal. We're building our culture. We're doing whatever we're going to do the way we've always done it, which is they didn't lose a player in the portal and they didn't gain a player in the portal. They did it the old-fashioned way. And they lost 2 NBA players in Tyler Kolek and Oso Ighodaro. So now what? You rely on Cam Jones, you know, but you have a couple of freshmen that you're hoping are difference makers. What does the top of the Big East look like? Is Marquette in that mix? I would slide Marquette out of that mix and slide in St. John's. I think the Red Storm are going to be really good. If you want to talk about a top 4, I would have it some mix of those 4 teams, and I'd probably put Marquette at 1 step below at 5, just because I don't know if I trust that they didn't make a move in the portal when it was available to them. But hey, if that works out, there are going to be a lot of coaches and a lot of donors that say, hey, the old-fashioned way still works. Maybe we try it that way, you know, going forward.
No, that's a really good point. A couple other notes I just wanted to share on this Xavier team. Last year, Xavier was 0-7 against the top 3 in the Big East, 10-6 against everybody else, which I think is a testament to Sean Miller. Another testament to Sean Miller is this man, what is it? 3 Sweet 16s, 4 Elite 8s, no Final Fours, so he continues to just be a little bit underrated. But, like, in my opinion, this is a top 10 coach in the sport. And when you think about, like, how many just absolute wagon offensive teams he's had, like, you know, his first year back at Xavier in 2023, this was the 4th best 3-point shooting team in the country, 8th adjusted offensive efficiency, 13th effective field goal percentage. Last year, those numbers really dropped. And this team was still, like, and I know it was 16 and 18, but I'm just talking about, like, what I saw with my eyes. Like, there was a lot to like about the team last year. And that culture, you know, playing at Cintas, and in the offense, I feel like is a absolute lock to be top 15 at worst in the country. So I have so much belief in Sean Miller and the talent on this team and the offensive ability. I really think the ceiling of this team boils down to defense. So I guess my question becomes, does it seem like is that something that the program is aware of and that they're really focused on getting that defense to a higher level? And 2, do you think the playing time will be in a way dictated by that? Or have you heard anything about, like, minutes distribution or how you expect that to be played out?
I would say that if you were to ask Sean, what he would always tell you, as much as he has changed his philosophy and as much as he is now this run and gun, play with unlimited pace, get up and down the floor, he still deep down loves the guy that can grind it out and get a stop when you have to and play really tough defensively. And this Xavier team is going to their best defense this year is going to be a good offense. I think Xavier is going to just flat out outscore teams 99% of the time when they win a game. It's not going to be because they lock down defensively. It's going to be because they won the game 92-84. and I think if they lose a game, it's going to be because they lost 96-92. I mean, if you remember UConn last year, the last game that they lost was at Creighton, when I think Creighton set a school record for 3-pointers made in that game. Like, it took a historic effort to beat UConn last year. I'm not saying that it's going to take a historic effort to beat Xavier, but in that same kind of frame of mind, yeah, you have off nights, but I can sit there at practice and watch Davion McKnight make 5 threes in 8 possessions, and then maybe the next day at practice, at a team workout, it's not officially practice yet, but like at a team workout, he might make 5 threes in 8 possessions, and then the next workout, he's not making as many threes, but Dante Maddox just made 4 out of 7, or Dante and Davion didn't have a great day to day, but that's all right. Ryan Conwell stepped up and, he went 4 for 8 from 3 or whatever it is. I'm just making up numbers here, but I'm just saying that the best defense of this team, I think, is just going to end up being, can they score 1 million points a game? I don't think they're going to be as bad defensively as I was worried about at the end of the transfer portal, because I do think Jerome Hunter is good enough defensively that if you need like that game-stopping lineup, you can get it. I do think Dalen Swain is an elite defender. I think Dante Maddox is a very, very good defender. I think Davion McKnight is tough. Lacina Traore, Bazile is just, he is an energetic, never going to give up on a rebound, never going to back down kind of player that I would feel comfortable having out there. They're not going to be a top 10 defensive team in the country. They may very well end up being a top 10 offensive team in the country. But similar to the team 2 years ago, they're going to be able to get stops when they absolutely have to. Maybe not over the course of an entire game. It's not going to be a Houston, but it's going to be a team that is capable of getting stops when they need it to.
Yeah, all that being said, they were 45th in adjusted defense at Ken Palm last season. So if you go top 50 again in adjusted defense this season with the top 10 offense, you're sitting pretty. So
yeah,
no, 100%. And we definitely Nick and I are super high on this team. Will be really exciting to see how it all plays out. But for Swain, Green, Hughley, just those guys, it was probably all coming off the bench at the start of the season. Like, that already is just saying so much about this group, because those are 3 of like legitimately some of my favorite like underrated guys in the nation. They're all on this team. So really excited to see what Xavier looks like. I think this team totally has a Final Four in its range of outcomes, and I think they're going to be a lot of fun to watch too, because they were super fun to watch, especially 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think like my point on that would just be that I was just texting somebody yesterday because Xavier got a 4-star commit yesterday, Jaden Forsyth, and somebody texted me yesterday and asked me about that. And then just kind of, we started talking about the season, and he said, Paul, I'm starting to think that this may be one of Xavier's more talented teams in recent memory that I can just go back to. And I said, with just the amount of shooting on this team and the amount of scoring, you get to the second weekend of the tournament. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say that this is a Final Four team. Like you could sit there last year and say that Purdue was a Final Four team, Houston was a Final Four team. Yeah, it didn't work out, but like, you could UConn, like those were Final Four teams. I don't know if I'm going to sit here in September and say that Xavier is a Final Four team, but a team like this, the reason that they get successful in a tournament is because they can just go out and score 80, 90 points consistently. And if it's January and they're not scoring 80 or 90 points consistently, maybe that's a little too far-fetched to say 90 points every single game. I'm not saying that. But if you're looking at closer to like that 22-23 team that went to the Sweet 16, those teams have a lot of success in the tournament because they can just score a lot. And they will be, win or lose, they're going to be a lot of fun to watch this year. Overall, and I do think they're going to win a lot of games.
Absolutely. Well, I'm on the same page there, Paul. Thank you so much for your time. Make sure you guys, if you're listening to this, I assume you're already very familiar with Paul, but if not, check out his stuff. He's awesome. And yeah, we'll very excited to watch the Xavier team play this year. Thanks again for joining us.
Absolutely, Christian. Nick, anytime. Hopefully we do it again some point this season.
Absolutely.